In this Enotria the Last Song video, I'm going to be talking about my hands-on impressions with the demo of the game. This demo is 8 hours long, will be available on PC and PS5 on May 22nd. So if you want to check the game out for yourself before you decide whether you want to buy it or not, you can look forward to that in just under a week's time. However, one more thing before I get into my impressions really quickly, which is that the release date of the game has been moved once again from August 21st to September 19th. The original release date was, of course, coinciding on the exact day that Shadow of the Erdtree launched on June 21st, so it was subsequently moved, and now it is moved once again until September 19th. So for those of you who are not familiar with Enotria the Last Song, this is an Italian Souls-like game that is being developed in Unreal Engine 5, and as I mentioned, is coming to PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox later this year on September 19th. So let's get into the things I like first about Enotria, having played this demo, before I get into the things I don't like. The first thing that I really like is the art style of the game, or the art direction of Enotria. It's absolutely fantastic. I like the way the game looks visually. It has a very visually appealing art style. And even though the graphics are not the best I've seen for an Unreal Engine 5 game, it's still visually very pleasing to the eye, and I like what they've done there. Additionally, I really like the level design so far from what I've played of the game. And I feel like they did a very good job of using the space that they had in order to cram a lot of things in there. So there are lots of things to discover. There's little secrets here and there. And it makes you really want to look around and check every corner for things. This is kind of the way I felt when I was playing No Rest for the Wicked. I felt like No Rest for the Wicked did a really good job of jamming things into a smaller space. And Enotria does that really well. And it has a similar linear feeling to Lies of P in terms of level design, but I think Enotria is a bit more creative in terms of how they use that to their advantage. And of course, jumping lends itself really well here, as it allows you to get to places to help with exploration. And there are things that you can reveal with certain interactive things in the environment that will reveal hidden structures and change what is seen on your screen, allowing you to get to other places. That makes exploration, in my opinion, a bit better than Lies of P, even though the game is still very linear. Next, I really like the combat of Enotria. The combat at its core feels really good, even though it's probably a little bit rougher than Lies of P is in general. I still really enjoy the foundation that's there, and the core combat mechanisms are really good. There's a posture system that allows you to, build up posture, a gauge on an enemy, and then once you've built up enough, you can critically strike them. This isn't, something that's groundbreaking or anything like that, but I really like that it's in the game. There is a heavy reliance on parries in order to win fights, just like Lies of P. You have perfect parry timing, and you have partial timings, etc. So getting your timing down is really important with parries in this game, and parries feel really good. In my opinion, they're not quite as hard to pull off as in Lies of P. And the weapon skills feel like they play less of a role early on, but I get the sense that they're going to play a much larger role the further you go into the game, simply because there's so many of them, and learning what is good and what isn't, and making a build around using them will, sometimes change the course of a battle. In terms of enemy variety, there hasn't been a ton of different enemy types, but I do really enjoy the movesets of the enemy types that are in the game so far. I like learning their attack patterns and figuring out what their attacks are going to be, and learning the timing for parries against them. So far, that has been very generally enjoyable, and if that continues the way it is throughout the whole game, it won't be the best thing about the game, but it certainly won't be the worst thing either. I also really like that there is a lot of complexity when it comes to character development. You have attributes that you'll assign points to as you level up, which occurs very similarly to Souls. You gather a resource, and you spend it on attribute points at checkpoints. Between that and the weapon skills that you can acquire throughout the game and slot up to 4 of them at a time, whatever combination you want, allows you to set up a build that you really enjoy. There are masks in the game that change certain properties of your character, kind of remind me of shells from Mortal Shell. So if you like that in that game, there's kind of a similar element here, and it also changes your visual appearance as well, which I really, really like. There is also a modest-sized skill tree in the game that gives you passive upgrades and can kind of further dictate how your character handles in combat. It's by no means the most advanced skill tree I've ever seen, but I really do wish that this is something From Software would do in future games, is add some sort of passive skill tree that changes the way your character plays in combat passively. There are also a variety of different weapons in the game. To my knowledge, the full game has over 120 different weapons, and these can be upgraded using upgrade materials, along with the masks themselves and the weapon skills themselves. So all three of these things can be upgraded, which is fantastic. And then, of course, there are different consumables you can use as well that further amplify gameplay and what you can do in combat. And I also really like that you have 3 loadouts and you can switch between them on the fly. So you can set up 3 different builds and change them without having to go back to the checkpoint and like change all your gear and your loadouts, etc. You can do that on the fly. And the last thing that I thought was pretty good was the performance. As a whole on my system, playing on a 3090 and an i9 processor, I was getting about, I want to say 90 FPS, somewhere between 80 and 90 FPS on average on ultra settings with everything maxed out at 1440p, which I thought was pretty good. The game generally played pretty smoothly. The one negative point, which is a big one here though, is that the first time you explore an area in the game, it seems to grab and stutter a lot, like loading the assets in certain areas is causing the game to grab. And when you come back through these areas in subsequent playthroughs, or if you die and you come back to the area, this does not happen, a second time or a third time. So it just seems to be that first time, and it can be a deal breaker in my opinion, because your immersion really gets broken when you're exploring a new area for the first time and you're just getting grabbed constantly. The game freezing up, for a second or two at a time, really interrupting your immersion and exploration and combat as well. So I really hope this is something that they can fix before the launch of the game in September, because if they don't, I have a feeling this game is going to get review bombed on Epic and Steam, simply because players have just had enough of performance issues. Moving along to things that I don't like, I would say that enemy animations and general combat animations in the game are pretty lackluster. If not uninteresting at all. It feels like these are an area where they probably saved budget and didn't want to pay for the animation to get developed for the game. And it feels like they put a lot more effort into the level design and the game's combat and core mechanics themselves. But it feels like enemies, kind of got the bare minimum in order to make the game still fun and enjoyable. Kind of like Lords of the Fallen, in my opinion. I feel like Lords of the Fallen's enemy variety and enemy themselves could have been a lot better. But I still feel like Lords of the Fallen, even though the state that was in is in a better place than Enotria is. And I feel like this is something that, probably isn't likely to get patched because you'd have to hire an entire animation team. So it's one thing that I particularly don't like about the game so far. Another thing is that even though I generally enjoy the combat of Enotria, it can feel clunky at times, and hit detection feels almost non-existent whatsoever. I could hardly ever tell when I was actually taking damage from being struck or when I missed time parries, and it got me killed more than a few times. And it does take some time getting used to the flashes on the screen when you're attacking and parrying. When I first started playing, it was very jarring seeing these things pop up on my screen. And I do feel like if you're sensitive to that, or if that really bothers you, you might not enjoy this game simply because of that happening on the screen. I did not find a way to turn this off. It would be great if there was maybe a way to just turn this off in the settings of the full version of the game, so they don't have to be there if you don't want them to be. And another thing I didn't really like is that while mechanically there is a ton of depth to Enotria, it can be really overwhelming at the beginning, and there are many things that are not explained at all or well. And for instance, weapon scaling, right? Like weapon scaling in the game, I can't really tell how it works from the time I've played or how enemy defenses work. There isn't a huge explanation on this. And I'm imagining this is something that, I will figure out after more time with the game. But initially, you just kind of pick a weapon and play with it and see how you do, because it's really hard to tell like whether a weapon is better or not than another weapon. And kind of piggybacking off this, even though there are 120 plus weapons in the full version of the game and 8 weapon types, it doesn't feel like there's a huge variety in animations and gameplay to these different weapon types from what I can see so far. They definitely play differently. You can definitely feel the difference when you're playing them, but from one sword to another, it just felt kind of similar. And even though, great swords are somewhere between regular swords and colossal great swords, I just didn't feel like there was a huge difference in the way that the game played generally from these weapon types. So I'm hoping that, as we play further into the game and more weapon types become available, the gameplay will change a bit more with these different weapons. And obviously, gaining more skills and things like that will also break this up. But in terms of the weapon variety in the game, even though there are a good number of weapons, it doesn't feel like there's as much variety as there maybe should be. And then lastly, I felt like the music and sound effects of Enotria were not particularly good. Like, they weren't terrible, but I didn't feel that they were a positive to the game, so I feel like these could be better. Although the voice acting so far does seem pretty decent, so I'm happy about that. So all in all, I think generally it's much more positive than negative with Enotria from what I've seen. A lot of, whether someone plays this game or picks up this game will be, what are they doing in September? What other games are coming out? I know Black Myth is coming out somewhere around that time of year, right? It's like August. People might be playing that. People might still be playing Shadow of the Erdtree. Really depends on when they pick it up. And also what the price point is for this game. I don't know what the price point is at the time I'm making this video. I'm assuming that information is going to be live like right when this video comes out. So that's obviously a huge factor. But I will say it's fantastic that there will be a demo out very shortly on both PC and console. That will allow you to play the game and make that decision for yourself, right? Like anytime a game puts out a demo or a studio puts out a demo for a game ahead of time to let you see the goods before you buy, that is a sign of confidence about their game. And even though I don't think Enotria is going to blow anyone away in terms of what it has to offer, I still think so far from what I've seen, it's a solid Souls-like, and it's definitely worth spending some time playing it so that you can make that decision for yourself. So what do you guys make of Enotria so far? Is it a Souls-like you've sort of maybe been keeping your eye on? Is it something you want to go try the demo to see if you'll like or not on May 22nd? What do you think so far? Let me know in the comments below.